Hello everyone and welcome back. So today I'm doing a much requested video. This is the tutorial for Scolopendra gigantea slash galapagoensis. This tutorial works for various color forms or whatever you want to call them of gigantea. It'll work for the Robusta or orange galapagoensis, whatever you want to call it. It'll work for regular galapagoensis. However, do not use this tutorial for Scolopendra species white leg. I'll say that one more time. Do not use this tutorial for Scolopendra species white leg. That's a much different setup. This is going to be coastal tropical rainforest versus an arid area centipede. So anyways, let's get moving along here. I'll start explaining what we have. Obviously, with a $400 to $1,400 centipede, you're going to want a pretty nice enclosure. So I'm going to make this aesthetically pleasing, and yet it's going to be functional in every way that it needs to be. We're going to be doing a multi-terrain setup here. So we got ourselves some peat there, some sand. We got a 50-50 peat sand pre-mix. That's going to be for a buffer zone, whereas like the sand is your beach low elevation level. This is your little bit higher elevation area with your forest and stuff. This is going to be rocky coastal, so we need a lot of rocks. And then for the forest area, obviously the forest stuff, a couple different kinds of leaf litter, and some gravel. So let's get right to it. First things first, I'll explain the enclosure itself to you. Now these are big centipedes, so you're going to want a big enclosure, obviously. Now with anything tropical, high ventilation, you do not want mold, fungal growth, so adequate ventilation is necessary. Anyways, we got the locking and sealing lid. Of course, there's a seal right along here, and as you can see on the lid, there's a little seal right in there. So, locking and sealing enclosure. Now let's move along to the substrate here. We got our standard peat, and then we got a little cup of sand here. This is between 5 and 10%, so we're going to go ahead and pour that in there, and we're going to add a little bit of water and get this all mixed up. You don't want it wet. You want it just slightly humid, let's say, but no standing water. So I'm going to get this mixed up. Alright, now that it's all mixed up, you can't really tell that there's sand in there too much. The sand, all it does is add stability for burrowing. This species doesn't burrow a ton, but it does certainly burrow. So we're going to go ahead and add this to the enclosure. Now we got the substrate in the enclosure, and as you can see, it's roughly about an inch deep right here. This is going to be my high elevation layer, and I've packed it nice and tight all along the edges. And I'm going to want a rock in between the two separate elevations, so I'm going to add a rock right here. So let's do that real quick. Alright, and there's our rock. And so next we're going to need our buffer zone. Now our buffer zone is a separation between the dry sand of the rocky coast and the forest floor, which is going to be humid. So that's going to go along right here. So I'll go ahead and add our buffer zone. It's also going to have a decrease in elevation. This is going to drop from the high elevation to the low elevation. So let's do that now. Now here it is, added in. What it acts as is kind of a buffer. It holds up this forest layer, and it gives an elevation decrease into the rocky coastal area. So now let's go ahead and add the base layer of the rocky coastal area. That's obviously going to be sand. So here we go. We got our base layer in for the rocky coastal area. So as I keep saying, rocky coastal area, let's add the rocks. Alright, we got some rocks in. Now obviously these rocks are not for burrowing. This one is right against the bottom, and then it's built up into the higher elevation here. There is a crack between here, and between these two. That gives it a little bit of enrichment, somewhere it can squeeze through. The one I'm working with today is going to be a peedling Robusta, but again, this works for gigantea, this works for galapagoensis, any color forms of either one of those. I got a peedling today because, as some of you might know, I just barely got back into the hobby, and I like to get my stuff small so I can pretty much see how it's being kept, and how it's eating and all that, because I don't want to get an adult centipede that hasn't been kept correctly or isn't anywhere near its size potential because it hasn't eaten or been kept at the right temperature. Anyways, let's go ahead and add a little bit of gravel to this. That's going to be mainly for aesthetics, but to add emphasis on the rocky coastal region. We're going to put a little bit of extra rocks right around the coast buffer area, because that's going to help with the incline and everything. So let's do that now. Alright, now we got our gravel added. It adds a nice area for the incline here. It sticks into that 50-50 mix really well. I've packed that down. This I sort of just sprinkle over the top. Now, I'm doing a coastal setup. Not all gigantea or galapagoensis are found in coastal regions. The one I'm working with is the Robusta. It's found in coastal regions of Peru and Ecuador. So I decided to do a coastline. Also, if you do a setup like this, even if it is a tropical centipede that's found deep in the jungle, this setup is going to allow a dry area and a humid area, which is pretty vital for any centipede. You don't want them to be overly humid if they don't need to be. There can be problems like mycosis and fungal growth if they are kept way too humid for too long. So the dry area and the humid area really allows for a range of habitat, and it keeps them healthy. It also adds a lot of enrichment. Ventilation too, I've went over that, very important. It's very close to ground level, which is needed. If you have ventilation on the top, it's not going to get as good a flow. They're down at ground level. They're not up here, you know what I mean? So anyways, I won't go into ventilation. I could talk about that for an hour. Let's finish this setup. Now we're going to add some twigs and leaf litter to this setup. Let's do that. So we got our twigs and our leaf litter in the coastal area. This is going to add some enrichment and aesthetics for you. It looks really nice, obviously. But now let's work on this area. This area we're going to add a little bit of moss in, some bark, and then a rock as well on the upper region. And then we're going to put some leaf litter very, very last, just around all of it. But let's put that bark and stuff in now. So we've added the bark and some moss. Now moss isn't necessary. Moss is mainly for aesthetics, and you got to be careful with moss. Moss can't be kept too wet, it can't be kept too dry. If it's too dry, it can clog the breathing holes on the side of the centipedes. If it's kept too wet, it's a great area for bacterial growth. So be really diligent about that. Also on your setups, always make sure to keep them clean. Don't leave dead food in there, obviously. If you see any mold, clean it out. If it's on wood or rock, sterilize it. If it's in moss, get rid of the whole dang piece and get new stuff, start over. Anyways, let's move along. We're going to put the rest of the leaf litter in this area. It's going to be composite leaf litter. It's going to be a little bit of this and a little bit of other kinds of leaves. So let's do that now. Alright, and there you have it. It's our completed gigantea or galapagoensis enclosure. This will work for either one of those, not white leg. Do not use this for white leg. This does, again, work for any of the color forms that you have. A lot of gigantea do live inland and not in the coastal regions, and in those cases just add a bigger area of land and less of the dry area. I always do like to provide a drier area. Again, I went over that. We won't go too deep into that. But let's go ahead and add the little Robusta and see how he likes his new enclosure. He's eager to get out, so let's let him get out here. Come on, little one. Oh, let's see. Might have a time getting him off my arm. Let me reposition him. Alright, now we got him. Let's get him to go down. Okay. That concludes it. So this enclosure, it looks really cool. For a higher end centipede, you want something that's decent looking in my opinion, but you want something that functions good. This is very multi-function. It's going to work for the centipede basically its whole life. Obviously it's very tiny right now, but it's going to not be tiny for long. So you'll want to keep these enclosures nice and warm for these species. They're not too keen on the freezing temperatures like Malaysian jewels or anything. So go ahead and keep it right around, I want to say 85 degrees Fahrenheit to 90. That should be perfect. It'll allow for proper growth, and yeah, you'll have yourself a big centipede in time if it's not already big when you get it. If you're like me, you'll want to get it small. And they usually are cheaper when they're peedlings. They can cost a lot of money big. But go ahead and like, subscribe, give me any feedback, and I'll see you guys next time here at Mike's House of 1,000 Legs. Thank you for watching.